The Media Institute, the foremost independent advocate for the First Amendment for over 4 decades, is one of the nation's leading nonpartisan organizations focused on media and communications policy. The Media Institute promotes freedom of speech, recognizes excellence in journalism, and encourages a competitive media environment and communications industry. Considering the current state of affairs in the nation's capital and across the country, our mission is more relevant than ever. Thanks to our sponsors and supporters at the Platinum level: Beasley Media Group, Charter Communications, Consumer Technology Association, iHeartMedia, LG Electronics USA, Paramount, Tegna, and Verizon. Our gold sponsors include America's Public Television Stations, CTIA, Everything Wireless, Comcast NBC Universal, the National Association of Broadcasters, and NCTA, the Internet and Television Association. Silver sponsors include ATSC, the Advanced Television Systems Committee, Altus USA, Cox Enterprises, Inc., DirecTV, DLA Piper, Fox Corporation, Lerman Center, PLLC, Microsoft, News Media Alliance, T-Mobile, U.S. Telecom, the Broadband Association, Wiley Rhine, LLP, and Wilkinson Barker Nauer, LLP. Thanks to all for making today's event possible. And now the President and CEO of the Media Institute, Rick Kapler.
Hey, good afternoon and welcome to our Communications Forum Luncheon for August. Thank you for being with us in our virtual format today. It was great to see so many of you in person at the Four Seasons Hotel in June at our luncheon with Alan Davidson of NTIA. That was our first in-person event since February of 2020, but it certainly won't be our last. In fact, we plan to be in person again in September, but more about that in a minute. But first, let me tell you about a couple of things here at the Institute. As you may have read in our latest newsletter, in mid-July, we moved offices from Arlington, right at Key Bridge and Roslyn, to Tysons Corner, Virginia. You can find our new address and phone numbers on our website. And second, it's getting to be gala time once again. That's right, our Free Speech America Gala will take place on Wednesday, October 19th, and will be in virtual format one more time. We have a great program lineup for you. Our Freedom of Speech Award recipient will be Lester Holt, the anchor and managing editor of NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt and the anchor of Dateline NBC. Our American Horizon Award recipient will be Ken Burns, the legendary filmmaker who's been making documentary films for more than 40 years. I'm sure you've seen his films like The Civil War, Jazz, Baseball, and many others on PBS. Our featured speaker will be FCC Commissioner Nathan Symington. And of course, the Master of Ceremonies will be our own Dick Wiley. You'll be hearing more about our gala, so stay tuned or check out our website. We have a terrific program for you today with Kathleen Grillo of Verizon. But before I introduce her, let me tell you about our next luncheon. On September 21st, we'll be in person, and our speaker will be financial analyst Laura Martin. Laura is a managing director and senior media and internet analyst for Needham & Company. The title of her talk will be Winners and Losers in the Media. And I can tell you that this will be a presentation you won't want to miss. We're still confirming the location in DC, but for now, mark your calendar for Wednesday, September 21st. And now, today's program. We're very happy to welcome Kathleen Grillo of Verizon. Kathy is Verizon's Senior Vice President of Public Policy and Government Affairs. She leads all of Verizon's global, federal, and state public policy, legislative, and regulatory affairs work. She's responsible for the company's public policy positions on a wide range of issues, including 5G deployment, spectrum, and privacy. Kathy represents the company before Congress, the FCC, and other federal agencies, as well as state governments. She's also the chair of the board of directors of U.S. Telecom, the Broadband Association. But Kathy's passion is creating a culture that encourages every member of her team to contribute, think boldly, and realize their potential. As a champion of women and diversity in the tech and telecom industry, she has led numerous initiatives and development summits to empower professionals, particularly younger women, to grow and succeed in their careers. In partnership with Elevate Network, she launched a leadership and mentoring series called Women in Tech and Telecom, and she has hosted a number of events to celebrate women leaders in a variety of fields. Before joining Verizon, Kathy was in private practice at Williams and Connolly in Washington. She was also a law clerk for Judge Harold H. Green of the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. Kathy earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Virginia and her law degree from the University of Virginia School of Law. Let me remind our viewers that you'll have a chance to ask questions during Kathy's presentation using the Ask a Question feature on your screen. Just type your questions and send them in, and we'll have a good Q&A session with Kathy after her talk. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great privilege to present our distinguished speaker, Ms. Kathleen Grillo.
Thank you, Rick. Such a nice introduction, and thank you, Mr. Chairman and the Media Institute for the opportunity to be here today. So it's fitting that I'm talking to you virtually because I intend to talk about technology and its power to transform how we connect and communicate. But I, for one, am sick of sitting behind my laptop, and I just could not do it today. I had to talk to you live, almost as if we were at one of our Media Institute lunches. So I've set it up as if we were here in person, and I'm at our beautiful Technology Policy Center here in our Washington, D.C. offices. And I even have some colleagues with me to sort of make this seem as interesting to you as possible. So let me talk a little bit about the Media Institute before I start. The Media Institute's mission to promote freedom of speech, to encourage a competitive media environment and communications industry, and to recognize excellence in journalism is more relevant and consequential than ever. In order to keep our industries competitive, vibrant, and accountable, and to foster public policies that benefit each and every consumer, we must have exceptional journalism that deepens our understanding of the public policy options that shape our future. And we've come to a historic inflection point in our technological capabilities and the social and economic benefits that flow from them. So in the US, we've gotten a lot of our policies right. Our broadband networks, both fixed and mobile, are the envy of the world. Verizon and other private companies have invested trillions of dollars in our broadband infrastructure. And after steady incremental progress, the federal government has launched into high gear with significant funding and innovative partnerships with a wide range of stakeholders. The challenge before us now is how to lock in these achievements and achieve new breakthroughs as we bring all Americans with us into the new broadband era, with affordable, reliable broadband for all and uniform privacy protections. So today, I'd like to offer some perspectives from Verizon on how we can meet these challenges by adopting smart policies today while keeping our eye on the future. So let me start by talking a little bit about Verizon because we've changed a lot in our 22 years and quite a lot even since I've last been here. So remember that commercial from years and years ago where the guy is walking around the country with a flip phone saying, "Can you hear me now?" I know you're thinking that was forever ago. And some of you have no idea what I'm talking about. Some of you even here because you're too young to remember. But today, Verizon is a global technology company, and we connect hundreds of millions of people. Our mission is to delight our customers by creating new products and services at competitive prices over the country's best wireless and wireline networks. But I'm just as proud of the values behind the value proposition that we are offering to our customers. So it's not just what we are delivering, but how we are delivering it. By showing up for our customers, for society, for our employees, and for our shareholders. So it's very simple. Verizon cannot be a leader in connecting people with technology if we are not connected to the daily struggles and achievements of our own employees. So let me cite, if I can, just a few examples. Verizon has been ranked as a top military-friendly company for the past 5 years. We have over 8,000 veterans on the V team, and we're also committed to their spouses and provide job flexibility around military reassignments. We earned a 100% score on both the Disability Equality Index and the Corporate Equality Index. For the last 13 years, we are among the top companies for working mothers. 7 of 11 members of our board of directors are women or racially or ethnically diverse. 59.7% of our US workforce are women or people of color. And we are committed to transparency, so we measure and disclose our progress in great detail. In our annual ESG report, we publish detailed charts with our employees' gender and race ethnicity information, and it's broken down by business unit as well as employee role and seniority. And as we also make clear in that ESG report, we have 100% pay equity with respect to men and women and race and ethnicity in the US. So I'm proud of what these achievements represent. The commitment that Verizon makes to inclusion and to the personal well-being and success of our employees reflects our commitment to policies that will ensure that broadband is available to every person in every place and at every income level. This is how Verizon has done business for years, making bold technology choices and big investments to meet and anticipate the needs of our customers as the world changes. So one great example of this is Fios. Back in 2003, Verizon became the first company to build an all fiber to the home network. And at the time, analysts scoffed at the idea. They said our capital costs were way too high, or that we didn't have the network traffic necessary to justify such a significant investment. But we feel pretty good about that choice today. And I think it's fair to say that our bet and our continued investment in Fios is one of the smartest bets in the history of our industry. And in that spirit, we're now investing in a new technology that is shaking up the broadband industry yet again and bringing even more competition and choice to consumers. And I'm talking about 5G fixed wireless access. So what is 5G fixed wireless access? It's a home internet access service, very similar to traditional wireline broadband, but it's delivered over our 5G network. Customers can install the service themselves, so no appointments, no digging, no wires. Prices at Verizon are as low as $25 per month with no data caps or annual contracts. And we offer speeds between 80 megabits and 300 megabits and even a gigabit in some areas. So this is significant for our company, but even more significant for consumers. So I would bet that most of you don't realize this, but for the last 15, 18 years, when we've been competing head to head with cable in the home broadband market, we've been doing that in just 10 states. So essentially our old ILEC footprint from Massachusetts to Virginia. But now that we've acquired the C-band spectrum, we can compete just as aggressively with cable head to head all across the country on a nationwide basis. And our plan is to cover 30 million households with 5G fixed wireless access in 2002 alone. And there are also many small and mid-sized providers who are eager to bring this technology to their customers. And that's why fixed wireless is soon expected to account for 15% of all broadband connections, according to Ericsson's latest mobility report. And this means that fixed wireless access is a powerful new competitor in the broadband market. It's going to provide new choices for consumers and increase competition, particularly in areas where it has been prohibitively expensive to build fiber. And the availability of 5G fixed wireless access will also help us address one of the most stubborn challenges that we face in our industry, the digital divide. To state the obvious, the pandemic brought home how critical broadband access is to a dynamic, resilient, inclusive society. So on one half of the digital divide, millions of us were able to continue to work, to go to school, to shop, and to be entertained. But on the other side, lack of access to broadband only deepened the isolation of people at the economic margins. It also exacerbated poor health conditions or disrupted education for millions of students. And we still have so much more work left to do. According to a survey Pew conducted in 2021, roughly 40% of lower income adults, so those making under $30,000 a year, still do not have access to home broadband or a desktop computer or a laptop computer. And these stark differences between how people made it through the pandemic and this realization of how critical broadband access and affordability really are, this is a call to action. And the good news is that we are answering that call. This is one of those rare times when technological leaps, private investment, and significant federal funding can all come together to narrow and hopefully close once and for all the digital divide and make a lot of progress on the social and economic disparities that accompany it. Just a few weeks into the lockdowns in April 2020, Verizon launched Fios Forward. And this really broke the mold of low-cost internet offers. So up till then, those kind of offers really lacked the kind of speed and capacity that families needed to be able to work and do schoolwork at home. So rather than create this sub-tier of services that had that kind of limited speed and capacity, we offered Lifeline eligible customers a discount that lowered the price of Fios service to as little as $19.99 per month for a 200 by 200 megabit service, so a robust broadband service with no data caps. And the government also sprung into action, as you all know, at the end of 2021, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act was passed. And this allocated $65 billion for broadband access and affordability adoption. This was a historic step in connecting America, but now we have to lean into the execution and finish the job. So first, let's consider the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, or the BEAD program that NTIA is administering. We need to be certain that it is structured in a way that works for experienced providers who can not only build reliable and efficient networks, but who will be around to serve customers over those networks for many years to come. I mean, no one benefits if funding goes to companies that aren't going to be around in 5 years or who have never really built networks to scale. I mean, that's just not a good use of taxpayer money. Building networks is technical, complicated work. If it were easier, more Americans would be connected. So we have one shot to get this right, and our grant programs need to attract that expertise and experience necessary to build networks that are built right and built to last. And I have to emphasize that it's critically important for states to select providers that prioritize fair labor practices, and again, have those highly trained, highly skilled workers who not only know the communities in which they will be building, but who have that expertise to make sure that we will build networks that last. Second, we need to be careful about the obligations that we put on providers in these funded areas. I understand that there's a lot of contingencies. There's a lot of things that we don't want to see happen in these areas. We don't want to create unfair monopolies. And we don't want to have a system where providers can charge exorbitant prices in an area where consumers don't have other choices. At the same time, we need to be very thoughtful about including obligations that could disincentivize participation. There are a lot of important policy interests to balance here, but requirements that would require special one-off services or specific pricing in a particular area or open access rules, those will create inefficiencies that just run counter to what we're trying to do, which is create new networks. And they may discourage companies from signing up. Lastly, while our focus is on the BEAD program as we seek to close the access gap, we cannot lose sight of what is an historic achievement, and that is the Affordable Connectivity Program, or the ACP. The ACP allows tens of millions of Americans to reduce the cost of their internet service by $30 per month or $75 a month on federal lands. It was an honor to be at the White House at the Rose Garden event in May, announcing that leading internet providers had committed to offer ACP eligible households high quality, high speed internet at no cost. These commitments cover more than 80% of the US, rural, urban, suburban, and tens of millions of Americans now can receive high-speed internet for free. In terms of doing our part, last March, Verizon announced we would lower the price of our Fios service to $30 per month for a plan that delivers symmetrical upload and download speeds of 200 megabits per second. And that means for customers who are eligible for the ACP, that Fios service is free. No data caps, and no other fees. We just recently announced pricing changes as well that will make our Fios home internet, our 5G home internet, and our LTE home internet available to customers at plans starting at $25 as well. So this is incredible progress, but we need to make sure that those struggling with internet affordability are not left behind when funding runs out for the ACP in the next couple of years. We also need to challenge ourselves to think bigger about some of our existing programs, like the Federal Universal Service Fund. We need to ask ourselves, what role can USF play when the BEAD program is completed? And how do we make sure that the program is tailored to those most in need? Or how do we continue to fund the USF as technology changes so dramatically and the industry evolves? We can't afford to assume that these and other questions will be answered down the road. We need to start grappling with those hard questions now. And that mindset is certainly relevant to the last issue that I'd like to talk about today, privacy. As we're connecting America, we have to make sure that we have policies in place that give consumers the confidence they need to fully utilize the internet. So at the start of my remarks, remember I said that the US has gotten a lot right when it comes to our public policy, but privacy is an area where we need to do much better. As our digital economy evolves and matures, it's just become increasingly clear that our current policy framework is just not up to the job of safeguarding consumer privacy. We need a national comprehensive framework that consumers trust and can understand. That means we need to pass comprehensive federal privacy legislation now and not assume that we can just kick the can down the road again. As it stands, there are a slew of federal laws right now that apply to consumers, and they're aimed at protecting personal information by restricting what kind of information can be used or shared. So we have laws that apply to healthcare records, personal finances, student transcripts, even video rentals. And still others aim to protect kids under the age of 13. But each of these laws is continually tested as technology advances and as the industry changes. We have a patchwork of federal laws that is literally riddled with gaps. Several states and other countries have tried to fill these gaps by adopting their own consumer privacy laws, but state laws can cause more problems than they solve. We just end up with a larger patchwork and more holes. The internet does not stop at state lines, and neither should consumer privacy protections. We need one national standard that applies equally to every person, regardless of what state they live in. And for over a decade, Verizon has advocated for federal privacy legislation. And the last 10 years have only reinforced that support and underscored the need for permanent federal privacy legislation. And the good news is that we're getting close. I'm sure most of you know that recently the House Energy and Commerce Committee marked up federal privacy legislation. And this was the most significant federal action on this issue in a decade, if not more. And it cleared the committee by a vote of 53-2. At a time when consensus on policy is rare, to say the least, that overwhelming bipartisan approval says loud and clear that Congress understands the importance of this issue and also knows that a single national standard is the only and best way to protect consumers and to give certainty to businesses as well. And we think that this legislation should be built on some foundational principles. It must be comprehensive and enforceable, simple to understand, and targeted to consumers' needs. It must be flexible enough to support future innovations and also national in scope so all Americans can be protected. In terms of specifics, we believe the final bill should ensure that companies can provide services to consumers easily and guarantee consistent and efficient enforcement by regulators. To that end, we think that there should be one federal agency in charge of privacy, the FTC, and we're pleased that the House passed legislation provides for this. The E&C measure also includes state preemption, but with a significant role for states to play in enforcing the national standard. And we think that's a fair and right approach. And while there should be mechanisms for consumers to get relief from bad actors, we hope that the final bill does not include an overly punitive private right of action. But even with such solid support, the bill still has a long road ahead to final passage. We should find common ground on these issues. But let's just pause for a second and recognize that for the first time in a long time, Congress is poised to deliver a major success on an issue that matters to every single person in this country. And consumers and voters from across the political spectrum would welcome this accomplishment. And if this Congress fails after getting this close, it will be a serious setback. We'll have to start all over in a new Congress, and political consensus might be elusive. So today, I've tried to provide a general overview of some of the extraordinary progress that we've made as a country in harnessing technology's power to connect us. This progress is a result of gutsy and visionary investments by the private industry and the government, and carefully executed and conceived public policies. It's time to build on our success. Innovations like fixed wireless, 5G, and significant federal investments, billions of federal dollars, have brought us to a pivotal moment and new opportunities to get the policy right. So now's the time to build on these investments and close the digital divide once and for all. And now, and I mean now, before the end of this Congress, is the time to pass comprehensive federal privacy legislation. And at Verizon, we're excited about this moment in time and the opportunity in front of us as a country if we can execute and get these policies right. So I want to acknowledge the Media Institute's role in this significant work. And again, express my thanks to you and Rick and the chairman, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to be here today. And I'm happy to answer any questions and to get any comments.
Hey, thank you, Kathy, and thank you for your very kind comments about the Media Institute. We appreciate your support. Very interesting talk. You really covered a lot of ground here, a lot of points you went over. Let's go back a little bit. We had a question from one of our viewers asking how big the role will be of fixed wireless in addressing the digital divide. And I think, let me just amplify that a little bit. It sounds like you've got sort of this complementary situation going on between FiOS, which would be your wired broadband, lowering prices and doing more to bring that to a wider range of people. And now the 5G home being fixed wireless. How do you see those as complementary and kind of working together to close the digital divide?
Yeah, so as I was saying before, we have a footprint between Massachusetts and Virginia. That's really where we've had our FiOS territory, where we've had our 1 gigabit fiber to the home network. But fixed wireless gives us this amazing opportunity to be a nationwide broadband provider. So we can bring the power, our marketing expertise, our network expertise, our customer expertise to everybody across the country and deliver solutions that make sense in particular areas, depending on the architecture, depending on the price points that are attractive to consumers. So we are really excited about this. We just reported earnings recently. We're seeing a big uptake in consumers' interest in the service. Like I said, we're going to pass 30 million households this year alone. So we really see this as a huge opportunity for us, and again, a great opportunity for our customers.
And with a 5G home, how do you get the word out there to, say, low-income people or rural people who may not pay as much attention or have access to a lot of the usual sort of marketing and advertising channels that you might use? How do you let them know it's there and available?
Yeah, I mean, we're working on that now. I'm hoping word of mouth too people love the service. When you tell people that they can get up to 300 megabits of speed for $25 a month with no data caps and no annual contracts, and no one has to come to your house, you literally can just order the box, have it delivered to your house, put it in the window, and you're good. So obviously that's something that's important to us. The whole wireless industry, as I said, is embracing this technology and moving in this direction. So I really see this accelerating over time and becoming a really powerful option for companies and for consumers over the next year or two.
You mentioned a few areas where Verizon would be lowering prices, like with the FiOS. You mentioned the Affordable Connectivity Program, if I got that right. And you said that Verizon has to be mindful of when the federal funding subsidies run out. What do you do then? Do you just have to eat more of those, to maintain the low rates, or what's the strategy there?
Well, what I was talking about, which I really think is the most important priority for this audience and for policymakers, is what do we do? There's this whole huge, the 13 people now are getting money from the ACP, and depending on that for this vital connection, this broadband connection that they need so much. And so if that money runs out, we're just going to have a huge problem as a nation. Forget about Verizon. I mean, this is going to be a pretty significant issue. So our hope is that Congress comes together and makes this program permanent over time.
And you mentioned when turning to privacy, you mentioned the patchwork of federal laws that seem to be organized around different subject areas or topics like healthcare and student information and various things like that. Do you feel confident that the federal law that you're describing, the more comprehensive law, would somehow supersede those or roll them into a more comprehensive package, or how do you reconcile all of these little privacy laws that are out there in these different subject areas now?
It may depend on the particular law as to whether or not the federal comprehensive legislation supersedes it. And I think that's the case with the current draft on the House side. But I think more importantly is a national standard that would apply everywhere across the country, and that certain duties, certain obligations, and certain rules would apply comprehensively. So whether or not particular areas get preempted or not, I think the key is just to have a national standard that addresses a lot of different scenarios and protects consumers everywhere in the country.
You mentioned that you feel there should be one agency in charge, and you mentioned the Federal Trade Commission. Why the FTC?
Well, the FTC is the government's agency. It's the government's arm when it comes to privacy. It's the expert agency. And the great thing about having the FTC in charge of enforcing this national standard would be that it would apply to every industry equally. So whether you're a telecom company, whether you're a tech company, whether you're Walmart or Amazon, whatever it is, the standards that are adopted there would be enforced across the board. And that's really the kind of uniformity and protections that we're looking for consumers. And the FTC has that expertise and has that staff at the FTC who really is familiar with these issues and has been for years. They're also not shy about going after different agencies, different companies and different industries. And that would be my expectations going forward. So we would think there would be strict and pretty vigorous enforcement by the FTC and also by state attorney generals. So at least the current draft that's before the House Energy and Commerce Committee that passed out allows for state enforcement as well. So I think you'd see pretty active cops on the beat there.
Okay. Now, the privacy legislation that's been out there, a lot of reports in the media about how it is viewed in some quarters as attacking targeted advertising that consumers receive. And that might even spell the end to the modern advertising era as we've come to know it in this age of targeted advertising. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, it certainly would change in some ways what companies can do and how they can use information. That's true.
Question, what's the latest update on C-band deployment and any concerns at this point?
No, we are, this is the most aggressive network build that we have ever done as a company. We're on track to hit all of our targets. We're actually ahead of most of them. So we are feeling really excited about what we can do with C-band. We're already seeing that in the market, products that we're offering to customers and the uptake that we're seeing on fixed wireless access. So we feel really, really good about where we are on C-band.
I'd like to raise one issue that you didn't talk about in your remarks, and that's the aviation issue and 5G. There's been a lot in the trade press about Verizon and AT&T kind of locking horns with the FAA over 5G deployment around airports, causing interference with aircraft navigation equipment and so forth. And can you tell us a little bit about that and what's been happening there in terms of how you're dealing with that?
Yeah. So first, now we know that 5G in air travel can safely coexist. So we were always certain of that, but now we know that for sure. And the FAA recently announced a plan that they've worked on with all of the stakeholders involved that will allow us to roll out our 5G completely and fully around airports over the next year or so. So we feel really good about, we're really committed to the plan. We feel good about the progress and where we are today. Airlines will have some time during this period to replace a small piece of equipment and a small number of airplanes. But we feel really good about where we are and the progress that we've made so far on that issue. So that's not interfering with our C-band deployment at all.
Okay, so it sounds like for a while there anyway, there seemed to be some tension or conflict between the FCC and the FAA, because the FCC gave you permission to do this in the first place, and then it sounded like the FAA came in and said, oh, wait a minute, we don't want you doing this.
Well, I think that whole process was not ideal from anyone's perspective. I think if you ask people at the FAA, at the FCC, and certainly in the industry, that was not an ideal way to surface the issue. But I also know that the FCC and the NTIA and federal agencies are trying to think about new ways to address these kind of interference issues as they come up earlier in the process, so that we don't have the kind of situation that we just had here with C-band and 5G. So we're looking good. You know, we feel optimistic about how these issues will be dealt with in the future.
Very good. Well, Kathy, this is great. Would you like to take a minute just to maybe hit a couple of high points and kind of summarize your outlook on the future here and how things look for Verizon and where you see things going? You know, you've covered a lot of that in your speech, but how would you sum it up in just a minute?
Yeah, I mean, I think we feel really good about where we are. We have some really important and significant challenges ahead of us, particularly with closing the digital divide. But between government funding, private industry investment and commitment to the issue, and really just a lot more understanding of how important broadband is to every consumer, I think we have the will and the resources to be able to resolve this issue once for all. We are excited about the role that we can play in doing that. And we see a bright future for us and for the country to come.
Okay, we just got one last question that just came in here. How well coordinated do you feel the federal broadband efforts are? And is there more that the government needs to do? And what's the biggest implementation challenge?
I mean, I think there's a lot of focus on coordination. There seems to be a lot of discussion amongst the various stakeholders at the FCC, at NTIA, and in Congress about the best way to manage how all of these agencies are going to work together and manage what is really the most significant infusion of funds, you know, in the last 5 to 10 years, maybe longer. So I know there's a lot of attention on this. I think we will have to pay attention to that carefully. I know there's even some bipartisan legislation out there to deal with the topic. But yeah, I think that will be an important priority, but the good news is it does seem like it is a priority.
Good. Well, I think maybe that's a good way to end our discussion here today, Kathy. Thanks so much for being with us. Very fascinating presentation, and thank you for the great insights on what Verizon is accomplishing, but both in terms of your employee base and what you're doing for the consumers of this country. So some fantastic work there, and thanks for sharing that with us and your vision for the future, and just a great presentation. We are very grateful to have you with us today. So thank you, Kathy.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rick. Thank you to everyone who's dialing in.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you to my team. There's a bunch of people here in person.
they're applauding. All right. We have live applause.
It was fun to try to make it seem a little bit, Rick, like one of our old school lunches.
That's right. That's right. Well, we'll be back to those soon. So thank you, Kathy. And want to thank all of our great luncheon sponsors for being with us today and for sponsoring the series, making this possible. And a special thanks to Dave Arlen and his team at Arlen Communications for producing today's event. And we just want to thank you for joining us today, to all our viewers out there. And we'll see you in September 21st in person with media analyst Laura Martin. So enjoy the rest of your summer and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you to our guest speaker today. Thank you to the Navy Band, and a big thank you again to our sponsors. We'll see you next month.